There are two different types of pain that go along with our grieving experience, and those are pain versus suffering. We have sat at the feet of millions, not millions, but hundreds of women as they're grieving. And there's a distinct difference between the person who's experiencing her grief pain versus the woman who is doing or allowing or getting hit with, I say allowing, and we'll break it down, undue suffering. That's just so miserable. Pain is healthy. It's a normal response when someone we love is torn from us. They're ripped from our lives. It's normal that we expect that we would have pain. It hurts. It's like a knife being stabbed clear through your soul. You literally cannot breathe. Versus suffering. Suffering comes when we feel dismissed, when we feel unsupported in our grief, when we don't have our family and friends to back us up. And not that we absolutely need them, but standing alongside us quietly is so, so helpful. Suffering is often caused by external forces, other people, opinions of our grief, events beyond our control that we do not want to attend or go to. Suffering can make this pain harder to bear. It's also where most people have the power to change how they're grieving is in their suffering. So that's the description, Erica. But something has come to me and I really want to share this. I didn't even tell you I was going to do this, but I thought about this earlier. When Austin died, it was almost like the grief was painful. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when Donovan died, it was like suffering. Does
Yeah,
that make sense?
it does make sense. And actually, when you were reading the descriptions out, I was thinking about what we were talking about when we first got on about Tony healing, because Tony's had surgery. So I was just
Yeah.
relating it to physical. You're actively tending to his wounds and helping him navigate his healing. He has pain because he's healing. It's every day
Yes.
is different. It's getting increasingly better than when you first started. There were times where the wound didn't look right and it was like, and I'm not, this isn't Tony's case, but in some cases when you have surgery, if it's not cleaned properly or tended to properly, it gets infected and then it's
Yes.
suffering. So that's what I was thinking about in the actual physical realm. When you hurt yourself and it's painful in the days and weeks after, you're healing still. But when you get to the part where it gets infected and it's gross and it's disgusting, that's suffering. That is how I was imagining it in my head. That is what happens to our hearts. It's very much the same. And like you said, when Austin died, we felt pain.
Yeah.
We were in shock. We were numb. We were sad. We were broken. When Donovan died, me specifically, I refused to acknowledge the pain. I didn't want to go into the healing parts. I didn't want to talk about healing. I didn't want to think about healing. I didn't want to think about a world without him in it. And for a year, I was suffering. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So it was a different type of grief. It was a different type of healing. Now, it doesn't mean that the person who is absolutely suffering in their grief can't find their way back.
Mhm.
You can absolutely find your way back. But I guess the reason that I wanted to do this topic today is because I want grievers to understand that there is a distinct difference between pain and suffering. And a lot of times, and we must understand that the suffering the second time they with the Donovan comes a lot from the outside forces, right?
Mhm.
So it was some of the outside forces, but it was some of you holding back, not
Oh,
wanting to share that with other people.
100%. Yeah, I think if I had communicated and lived in my truth, it would not have been that way. But I didn't live in my truth. I was putting on the fake smile and coming up with the script to avoid having the real conversations and being honest. And that's what it comes down to also. And we've talked about this before. There are choices in
Yeah.
grief. I
Yes.
chose to suffer. That was my
Yes.
choice. I actively made that choice because I was so distraught and so overwhelmed. that I did not want to even take one step towards healing. It's sometimes I think you feel it's self-inflicted. It's definitely self-inflicted.
So, and that was really good that you brought that point up, that you made that choice, because grievers have choices, right? And so at any point you could have chosen to walk out of this pain. You could have reached out to anyone and said, help me out through this pain. Um, but I think a lot of times grievers don't know that that's an option, that they have the option to go that way. But let's go into a little bit more of the outside sources that come in.
Mhm.
I had a thought and it just went through my head, but I'll bring it back. Okay. When you feel dismissed or unsupported in this pain, like you start sharing about the loss of your loved one, you start talking about them. Man, this is so hard. And the example I gave earlier was like, yeah, I'm really missing my mom. My mom died. And when the response back to you from a work colleague or a family friend or someone from church is, you should really be thankful you had her for so long, instead of you allowing to share what's really going on in your heart, that can cause undue suffering. When you are being dismissed by everyone around you that you need as support, causes undue suffering.
Yeah. And also, I think that what goes along with feeling dismissed is, the first 2, 3 weeks, you're getting bombarded by phone calls, texts, people showing up. And then around that fourth week mark, it's radio silence. And that definitely contributes to the feeling of being dismissed and forgotten, because it's like, hey, I'm still sad. Hey, remember me? And like everyone's like, life goes on for them and they move forward. And so I think that that also contributes, because you just feel left behind in your grief.
Yeah. Hey, sister question. Is that word right? Undue suffering?
Mhm,
That's right. Okay. It
mhm.
sounds funny when I say it. Okay. I remember what I want to say about the choices and the suffering. Some people choose to suffer because they feel they should. Hear me out on this. My um my child died in a tragic accident. I should suffer the pain of this grief. Like they bring it on themselves and they hang in there and they stay in the suffering because they feel that that's what they're supposed to do. I lost my child. I shouldn't be living. I shouldn't be laughing. I shouldn't be watching this television show and enjoy. I can't enjoy this cup of vanilla ice cream. I should suffer for the rest of my life because my child is no longer here. Like they
Yeah.
make that choice.
Yeah. We had a man that we spoke to that that just brought that up for me, that he had an argument with his daughter before she left and ended up dying in a tragic accident. And he wouldn't even consider the possibility of healing because he felt like it was his fault for doing the argument. And that part is just, he chose automatically suffering without a doubt, without a question, 100%. That was his only option. He wouldn't even think about being able to heal because of the argument. And so sometimes when things like that happen, when there's for me with Donovan, not that we had an argument, but I didn't answer the phone the night before, the night of his motorcycle accident, and I carried that for a long time. But I was able to see a bigger picture, and that our relationship was so much more than that one moment in time. But some people can't go back to the bigger picture and look at the relationship as a whole and say, we had a beautiful relationship. He was my first child. We had a friendship. It was amazing. People won't allow them to get themselves there because they feel like they need to be punished for the things that happened right before the accident.
Right. I agree with you. But the other thing is, on a side note to that, is that it took you a while to get there. That's
Oh
not
yeah,
something
no, no, no,
you
because
get
I was
to.
suffering. I was
Yeah.
suffering.
She suffers. But you're not gonna get to that. Sorry.
No,
Sister aches. You're not gonna get to that in 6 weeks or 12
no.
months. You know what I mean? Like that, coming to that conclusion takes a while.
Yeah, I'm just saying I think I didn't even realize I was doing it to myself is what I was. It wasn't
Yeah.
intentional. For him,
Yeah.
it was 100% intentional. He was just going to choose suffering. There was no other possibility for him.
So I want to add to that comment is that in all of the losses that I have experienced, I don't see that I ever suffered beyond regular grief pain.
Mhm.
The average person, and hear me out, my friends, the average person is going to have, I don't even want typical grief.
Mhm.
The average person is going to have typical grief. We know that the suffering exists. We've met the clients, we've talked to them. We know that the suffering is there. But what we want you to understand is a lot of time the suffering comes from outside sources. It's not just you've made a choice to just suffer through it.
Mhm.
So we talked about being dismissed. How about when your grief is being judged by others, or you're getting, you and I call it the stupid things people say, or stupid advice on your grieving? Like, it's typically negative. Like you gave me this as an example earlier, and so I'm going to use it. But it's like, why are you just sitting there? Don't you have things to do? You know,
Mhm.
when you're having a grief moment of just numbing out or a brain fog and you can't figure out what to do. Or when the spouse or partner is like, I never see you cry. They're judging your grief. They're judging the degree of how much you're grieving. I never see you cry. You're not grieving as much as me. I grieve more than you. Or someone coming to you and saying, man, all you do is grieve. You never want to go out anymore. You never want to have any fun. You're no fun. Right.
Yeah.
So be judged in your grief.
And with social media, the judgment is just it's plentiful because you can't do one thing without one posting it and then people judging it. So it's like the thing where we see people who their spouse or life partner has passed, and you see them out at a restaurant with friends. You're like, oh, well, she's over that fast. You know what I mean? It's just how people look at it. And
Yeah.
it's a shame. It is a shame that there is so much judgment of the way people grieve, but it is 1,000% a real thing.
Was even more, and I love that you said that, is so true, is because they come and tell you there's plenty of fish in the sea. There's plenty
Yeah.
of fish in the sea. You'll find someone else. And then you do find someone else and they're judging the amount of time that it took you to find that someone else. Come on, people, let's get it together.
Yeah.
The amount of judging that someone can do on your grieving process is just unrelenting. It's unrelenting. They have decided, and I say they have decided how long you should take to grieve, how much grieving you should do, and exactly how that grieving should be done. It's
Yeah.
like, can you have anybody step on something more personal to you than that?
Exactly.
And on that same token, Erica, that grief is yours. It's 100% yours. You need to own this grief. You need to tend to this grief. You need to take care of this grief. You need to go after the healing of this grief. You can't expect it to just go away and it just lull away.
No.
That's not gonna happen.
No, that's the fantasy that they try to sell with the time heals. But no, you definitely have to, it's work. It is
Yeah,
work, like everything in life. If you want to have a fit body, you got to work out and you got to eat right. That's work. You got to put in the time and effort to make the choices that are healthy for you. It's the same with grief.
what if you don't want to have a fit body? Anyway, side note.
Then
So,
you're suffering.
spending time with toxic, unhelpful people. So, and hear me out on this one. A lot of times we go to our people, our
Mhm.
friends, our family, our work colleagues, thinking that they're going to give us some relief from this pain. And it sometimes takes a while. We'll have grievers say, she kept inviting me, so I kept going. But every time I left, I felt worse than when
Yeah.
before I went there. You know what I mean? Because hear me out on this. Grievers are dying to talk about how they're feeling. They're dying to talk about the pain that's going on in their heart. They're dying to share their story of grief and pain. And if they don't feel listened to or heard with respect, they stop talking.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that causes suffering.
Yeah. It's I don't know why I'm not even hungry, so I don't know why I keep taking this to food, but it's the only analogy that's coming in my brain. You are what you eat. You also are what you take in. So being in with toxic people and you speaking your truth and crying about your loved one, and then having, that negative circle, the naysayer, well, he wasn't that great. I don't even know why you're crying over him. Like
Yeah.
you weren't even happy most of the time. You guys, all you did was fight. Like, ew.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, this one's huge, and I want to spend some time on it. But and this is some of the things that you and I teach in processing the pain of grief is denying your true feelings. Okay, I said denying your true, and I underline true feeling, denying any feelings at all. Any feelings that come up with grief, but just denying them. What does denying them mean? It means to absolutely resist them, to not
Mhm.
allow them in. If you are mad and you're mad as hell at your person who has left you in a tragic accident, and you have nowhere to share that or say that, that that anger is going to grow. It's
Mhm.
going to grow in your gut. It's going to grow in your heart. It's going to grow in your stomach. And pretty soon, before you know it, you're going to be taking that anger out on everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody
It
around you, everybody near you.
it does. Grief in general will bleed into every facet of your
Yeah.
life. But when you're in a suffering state of mind, it's like a toxic venom instead of just a bleeding. It's a toxic venom that seeps into every facet. It will affect every relationship you have. It'll affect whatever your career path is. And there are times when you and I have done uh, sales calls, and we follow up to check on the person that we met with who was crying and, devastated by the loss. And it scares the shit out of us when they're like, "Oh, I'm good."
Yeah.
We're like, okay.
Your dad just died
I mean,
yesterday.
we know that that is a, a recipe for disaster,
Yeah.
because they do go in, and and we know the signs of it. It's self-preservation, and we
Yes.
get it. You
Yeah.
absolutely have to be in some sort of realm where you can function. And
Yeah.
you go into this, like, the brain takes over and says, "No, you're fine. You're fine. It doesn't hurt. Don't worry. It's okay." But that catches up with you, and it
Yeah.
catches up with you in a very, very bad way if you let it go too long.
Well, and unfortunately, it ends up affecting the other person because you end up taking it out on somebody that you never meant to take it out on. You end
Yeah.
up taking it out on the teller at the bank. You take it out on your child. You take it out on your child's toys. Like it's gonna come out somewhere. Grief has got to come out somewhere. Denying your true feelings over and over and over again, day in and day out, and not telling your truth
Mhm.
causes undue suffering.
I'm sorry, I just want to jump in. One of the biggest game changers for me was when I stopped using the new normal script and telling everyone,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm just living in my new normal," which was absolutely not my truth. I was 100% devastated and, like, thought I was beyond repair. But then when we learned about doing the grief boundary and speaking your truth, "I'm struggling today, but thank you for asking." Just because you're speaking your truth doesn't mean you have to go into the full detail. "I got up at 6 and I just started crying." You don't have to do that. You can just, because there's something that happens when you're not denying it and you're speaking it honestly, but you don't go into the story. You're just saying the truth about how you feel. It's a relief that happens, because
Yeah.
when you're not in your authentic self and you're denying how you really feel, it makes it worse. It makes it worse for that much longer. You feel icky.
Icky is a technical term?
Oh my god, it's so professional. It
Okay.
is so professional.
So, hey, quick question though, on the just denying the self. One of the first things we tell everybody we meet is that you have to tell your truth. You have to tell your truth. That means I tell the truth about me, but I also tell the truth about you.
Yeah.
So, for example, and this is one of the examples I use all the time. If I'm grieving someone who has died, my partner, my person that I love, but they were a drug addict, a
Mm.
lot of times we see a lot of grievers, they just forget the drug addict part and they forgive it because the person is now dead, right? The person has now died, which they may have actually died from their drug addiction. And we just forget that part. We just glaze over it. And now they come to us explaining how amazing this person was.
Yeah. Yep.
There's no doubt in my mind and in my experience that what's going to come up for you in your grief is all the times he didn't show up to the wedding, all the times he didn't show up on that date, all the times he didn't show up for the kids, all the times he promised he was going to quit drinking and using drugs and never quit drinking and using drugs.
Mhm.
That's our truth. Our truth is that Joe Bob was an alcoholic, and I have to grieve that aspect of it as well. But when I'm not telling my truth, so I'm sitting on the couch and I'm crying from the loss because I miss him so much, which is also your truth.
Mhm.
The fact that you're not telling the truth about who he was and what your relationship was causes undue suffering.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. We're so quick to want to forgive when the person passes away, but there's a lot of healing that comes from the truth. Your path to healing is through the truth.
I want to go back to one of the things that you and I talked about, and that was the choice to suffer.
Mhm.
A griever can make the choice to suffer when they're punishing themselves, when they choose to punish themselves for not preventing what happened,
Mhm.
not preventing them from buying the motorcycle, not preventing them from continuing to use the drugs, not preventing them from leaving the house at midnight to go get that donut that you were like, no, just
Mhm.
stay home, we'll get it in the morning. Not preventing the thing, right?
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
choose we can choose to punish ourselves.
We always look for someone to blame. Always. That's our natural instinct. It has to be someone's fault. We very rarely blame the person that has died. We find a living person, whether it be ourselves or you, Sharon, like it's your fault. Why didn't you tell Donovan not to buy the motorcycle? You know what I mean? It's like, if it, I don't know why that's in our human nature. I think because it's so out of our ability to comprehend that this could really happen to us,
Yeah.
that we have had this terrible thing. So now this terrible thing has to be someone's fault.
Yeah.
And for parents, it's that they take it on for themselves. Me personally, I didn't take on the Donovan thing because I begged that boy not to buy a motorcycle. So I couldn't take that on. But in other situations where, someone driving recklessly when you knew they weren't prepared for the car, but you bought them the Porsche anyway for their
Yeah.
16th birthday. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's something that then it's your fault. So it's hard to recover from that. And that definitely is a path straight to suffering when the blame has to be assigned to someone. And most of the times it's ourselves.
Right. And I could also see, and there were things in my relationship with Donovan that I wish I had said. When I did my grief work with him, there were things I wish I would have said. The
Right.
motorcycle wasn't one of them, even though you and I had that conversation about the motorcycle. But I could see him going, "Oh, Perrin, you so cute." Like
You
not
would have
listen.
bought the damn motorcycle for him because that's
Oh
how
yeah,
he
that's true.
worked you over.
That's true. That's true.
You're
Because yeah,
right, Pomeray. You do need that motorcycle. Let's go get it.
Mama crazy. Let me buy that. Um, okay, so one of the things that suffering can be caused by is, and here I have this note that says not eating or getting enough sleep, but it's not doing your self care.
Yeah.
Not doing your grief self care can cause undue suffering. And can I just say something? Yes, you can go 3 weeks without taking a bath if you choose to, or shower if you choose to. You don't want to take a bath, you don't want to brush your teeth. I have no problem with it. Don't do it. But I'm here to tell you that the shower might make you feel a little bit better. So maybe you should do it. Maybe once in that 3 weeks, go in and just wash off because it might make you feel better. A warm towel on your face might
Mhm.
make you feel a little better. Do you have to do it? Absolutely not. You don't have to do it. If that's your choice and you, the griever, choose not to do that, by all means, don't do it. But it might make you just feel a little bit better. Change the sheets. That's all I'm saying. And take a bath. And it might make you feel a little better that night.
100% you have to brush your teeth. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You have to brush your teeth. I
No,
can
you
get
don't.
on board with anything else, but the teeth brushing that's a hard no. You got to
Only
brush.
if you're around people. If you're at home by yourself, you don't have to brush your teeth.
I guess. No, and that you do have to, because there are it's a little bit of a routine. It's like
Yeah.
slowly coming back to feeling human again.
Yeah.
When you have clean clothes on, your hair's washed, your teeth are brushed, you feel like a person instead of just this big blob of misery and sorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's, and you know, we need to do a like a whole podcast on that. It is absolutely true. You don't want to eat, you don't
No.
want to shower, you don't want to brush your teeth, you don't want to get the eye crusties out in the morning. You definitely don't want to touch that hair because the hair hurts. You can't even brush your hair because it hurts. You know what I mean? And so we know that a lot of grievers will go day in and day out without doing that. But at some point, you're going to have to get up and do it. But not doing it for prolonged periods of time is what causes the suffering. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, avoiding or not avoiding anything that depletes your energy causes suffering. Like not wanting to go to your son's PTA meeting in the middle of your grieving, but you get up and you force yourself to go, that depletes your energy, that causes undue suffering. You and I say all the time, it takes every bit of energy that you have just to grieve. Now I add on the PTA. Now I add on having to make my daughter's lunch. Now I add on that I signed up for this field trip and I don't want my daughter to her life to change. So I'm going to go to this field trip. Um, I have a beautiful client. Man, she's just so amazing. And I remember days after we started working together, she had to go on a field trip for her son.
Mm.
And she called me and she was bawling. She didn't know how she would make it through the day on the field trip. And so we talked it through. I literally just talked it through. And it was that if she didn't go, the whole class was not going to get to go because they were short one mom. And if she backed out, the class wouldn't have gone. And so she wanted to go for her son and for the class and everything. And the thought of just going on that field trip was breaking her apart. And so I talked about how she should act, what she should do. She had my personal cell phone number to call me. But my point is this, that doing those things, it depletes your energy. And when your
Yeah.
energy is depleted, which is already depleted, it causes additional suffering.
Already just doing one of those field trips when you're not grieving is a struggle. But when you're grieving, so I ended up meeting a woman that I did work with in our community. And when, after the first time I spoke to her, when she came here to my house, and she was like thanking me for taking the time and talking to her. And she said, I always thought you were mean. No one has ever said that about me. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you always look so unapproachable. And I said, when was I unapproachable? So I did a lot of stuff for Jordan with his school because I was the only option. Lewis was traveling. Kayla didn't have a driver's license yet. And I was when I realized the time frame of it, it was right when I was in the midst of my suffering. And so I can't even imagine what my face must have looked like and the vibe I was sending out, because it was like, she said, you just seem so unapproachable. And I have never in my life had someone say that about me. But when I thought back
Wow.
on it, I was like, oh my God, I wonder what I must have looked like.
Well, just think about that. I'm just thinking that your facial expressions were different, your thoughts were different, your energy that you were putting into the world was different. And she perceived it as unapproachable,
Yeah.
but the average person who probably knew you probably perceived it as hurt and pain. And wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It was so interesting because I like laughed like the whole rest of the day about that. I was like, mean? But yeah, I could see it takes every ounce of will you have when you are grieving to do the stuff, to do the things, because you still have things to do. And then, but when you're in suffering, it just comes off, I think, so different because it's like I think you radiate this vibe of misery.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I think on the final note here is that you don't have to suffer in your grief.
no.
Because we don't know how to grieve, most of us try to figure this out on our own and we do what we think is best. And then we go to Google and we find out about the 5 stages. Then we constantly are trying to figure out what stage we're in. Here's the deal, friends. Erica and I have been teaching grievers how to grieve for 17 years. It is okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
It's okay to get an understanding on how to do this grieving thing. It's not innate with you. You're not just going to naturally know how to complete a relationship. That's what we do. And so you can avoid the suffering. Grieving is hard enough on its own
Mhm.
without you having to suffer through it.
Yeah. And I just want to take it back to the analogy I used in the beginning. When you have a cut on your arm and it's open and it's, a fresh wound, and you go to the doctor and you have it looked at and he puts you on antibiotics and stitches it up and you change the bandage, you have pain, but you're on your path to healing. The pain and the scab and what's happening is healing. But if you don't tend to it and you leave it and it gets dirty and gross and it festers and it gets angry, we all know what that looks like. We've seen it in movies. It's angry and it's red and it's pussy. Oh, God, I'm going to gross myself out. Anyway, you know what I mean? You know where I'm going. That's suffering.
Yeah.
If you don't do something, that's what's happening to your heart.
Yeah.
That is what's happening inside of you. So that's what I want to leave you with, that gross, disgusting image I just laid
Yeah.
out that almost made me gag. That is the difference.
Yeah.
We can get to healing. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it's hard. No one said this is easy. It is honestly the fight of your life. I was in
Yeah.
the fight of my life, but it was worth it because now I'm back to living. And
Yeah.
that's the goal.
Yeah. Thank you, friends.
Bye, friends.